Hey y'all, welcome back to Exile Wargaming, where today we have another Harlequins battle report against the highly requested Imperial Knights in the Noble Lance Detachment. Now, the list we're bringing today should look a bit familiar. We're still running it through its paces, and I couldn't pass up a chance to test against a matchup like Imperial Knights. What we have here are two Anvil units in 11-man units of troops. One of them will be attached to a Troop Master with Chegarax Coil for a ton of impact mortals. The other will be attached to a Shadow Seer with the Mistweave Cloak. We have 4 units of 5 troops. 2 of them will be attached to Troop Masters inside of 2 Falcons. The other 2 will just be inside of 2 Star Weavers. We have a unit of 5 Rangers, 2 units of 5 Fire Dragons that'll be in a Wave Serpent, and the Solitaire to round out the list. We're coming in at 15 total units at 2,000 points on the nose. Now, with the recent updates to Imperial Knights, this is going to be an interesting game. Our opponent is bringing a ton of Armigers. Canis Rex, 4 Armiger Hellverns, 5 Armiger Warglaves, 2 units of 5 Deathwatch Veterans, Imperial Rhino, and the Eversor Assassin. I guess the goal of this Eversor Assassin is to be able to hunt down your opponent's HQ and give his army a 5+ feel no pain for the remainder of the game. But with the new changes and points updates, they're still coming in at 14 total units at 1,995 points. This is pretty wild once we see it on the board. Now, we'll be playing Mission P, which is Scorched Earth Crucible of Battle style deployment on new GW Terrain Layout 8. Now, getting into deployment, this was a little bit tricky because while we have 15 units to our opponent's 14, a lot of ours are in transport. So our opponent did dramatically outdrop us by a few units. What they have here is a unit of Deathwatch Veterans inside a Rhino, ready to kind of push up towards this objective or steal it. They have a good amount of OC, and this is a pretty tough angle for us to take. There's another Armiger Warglaive right here, a Hellvern, and then a Warglaive centered up here. 2 Hellverns to just push the middle and shoot wherever they can. If they can get to this middle objective, everything gets anti-fly 2+. They're wounding our vehicles on 2s. There's 8 shots. Most of our saves are, 4+. If we're in cover, maybe we can get a 3+ on a Falcon or a Wave Serpent. But overall, these things are devastating to any of our units with fly. He has Canis Rex in the middle, another Warglaive over here, a Warglaive out here, and then another Hellvern on this side. He did opt to put 1 Warglaive in reserves. And then to hold it all out, they have a unit of Deathwatch Veterans on the home field objective. This is kind of expensive for this unit, but it's definitely something that could push back against the Solitaire. So in this specific matchup, this is actually a really good unit to be back here. And then the Eversor Assassin is in the center. What we wanted to do is make sure that our opponent could not get into range of our Warlord, which is the Troop Master with Chegarax Coil, early on in the game and give our opponent a 5+ feel no pain army wide. Once they're honored, I believe they get that, but traditionally they would have a 6+ feel no pain. So we have the Solitaire right here in our big unit of troops with the Troop Master. We have the Shadow Seer brick up top over here. Now there's a couple options that we could utilize this for. I'm not sure that we approach this the right way in this game, but because we have that 18-inch lone op, it is safe on this section of the board, and we can test up here early. What we did is this was the last unit that we placed, and our opponent then ended up putting some more resources over here afterwards. So maybe even if it doesn't kill a whole bunch, we can get them to force some additional resources here instead of down here where we want to be holding for the majority of the game. So we're going to see what we can do here. If we could maybe move blocking our opponent early on may be a great option. I thought about that with the Rangers as well, but then we'd have to dedicate a unit of troops or something like that to the home field objective, and it just didn't feel that good. So we're going to try this for this game and kind of see where it takes us. Otherwise, we're just using a good bit of symmetry. We have a Falcon up top over here. This Falcon can shift down here or hit the center. We have the Wave Serpent with the Fire Dragons, safe from any firepower or anything that could engage it, but with the advanced engines and the agility tokens, we can get it up pretty close to the midboard, unleash the fire dragons, and just lay waste to whatever we see. If our opponent then doesn't wipe them out immediately, we can use fade back and get back into the transport afterwards. Otherwise, we have a Star Weaver and another Star Weaver over here to just push this objective. Now our opponent wins the turn 1 dice roll and has to go first, which is a boon for us going second on Scorched Earth. That means we could potentially just stalemate this game and run away with the score at the end of it. So this puts the onus on our opponent to make something happen early on. What he ended up doing was drawing Bring It Down and Cleanse as his secondaries. It's not going to get Bring It Down, but Cleanse is very easy. He ends up getting the Eversor Assassin up here, cleanses the center objective, and then moves 2 Warglaves out over here to hold this and cleanse there as well. The Canis Rex also positioned up in case this solitary unit, I guess, dual charged, he can heroically intervene to get there as well and just wipe it out in the clapback. So that's pretty nice. It makes sure that we can't charge both of these units. So I guess we'll see where that goes from here. Everything else just kind of pushes up towards the midboard in stages for a big follow-up turn. It doesn't look like our opponent's being hyper-aggressive at this point. He moves the Rhino with the Deathwatch veterans over here and another Warglaive right here. Now on our turn 1, we ended up drawing Sabotage and Engage on all fronts. We're going to get rid of Sabotage anytime I can gain an extra command point early on. I absolutely want to. I want to make sure that I can use both smoke and throw grenades and maybe reactive move pretty liberally throughout this game. And every once in a while, I may want to use a command point reroll if I do manage to get a fusion pistol through and it's just not a solid damage. I do want to reroll a 1 or a 2 on some of those because our opponent's units are no longer 12 wounds, they are 14, and that is a really big break point for us. So we had a couple options on this turn. We ended up pushing the Shadow Seer brick up. We got a little bit overzealous. I thought I'd be able to throw grenades and shoot one of these down or at least bring it pretty close and then dual charge this unit and finish off both of these afterwards. In the center, we ended up moving up our Star Weaver and our unit of troops to put some firepower into the Eversor Assassin. Go figure, fusion pistols are pretty good, and those neuro pistols are actually really great into infantry as well. We bring our Falcon up over here. We disembark our troops so we can try to bring down this armiger and get some rerolls. And then this Falcon pokes out over here to be able to get some angles on this armiger as well. We disembarked another unit of troops from this Star Weaver, and they're going to put a fusion pistol into this Rhino, and we do end up scoring a pretty substantial amount with the damage. We bring it down to just 3 wounds remaining. So that was pretty nice for us there, but we also want to leave this Star Weaver here in case we want to re-embark this unit of troops into it afterwards and protect the Troop Master. Otherwise, we could just wait for our opponent to get out with something and then reactive move back in to the Falcon. So unfortunately up top here, we're moving back to the Shadow Seer brick. We were not able to bring down this armiger or get it anywhere close. All of the fusion pistols either missed or failed to wound, and we are not going to go for the 2-for-1 at this point in time. Now, in the charge phase, we end up moving our Shadow Seer brick into this Armiger Warglaive up here. Then we pile into another, and the Solitaire that we blitzed earlier in this turn is able to pick up the Rhino. Now we are just barely able to bring down one of these armigers. The dice rolls are not going that well for us so far. And the other that we piled into ended up wiping out 4 or 5 of our troops, but they did take 3 mortal wounds from Hazardous. In our opponent's turn 2, they draw Overwhelming Force and recover assets. So they do need to destroy some units on objectives, which is pretty solid, but they also need to start taking up some space early on. So they ended up pushing up the Deathwatch veterans over here. The Troop Master and Troop ended up using a reactive move to get inside the Falcon. They end up throwing grenades into the Solitaire and do get 4 mortal wounds. And we have to resurrect him at the end of the phase. But all of our troops are back in their Star Weavers or their vehicles at this point in time. He ends up moving up this Armiger Helvern over here, this Warglaive in the center, and then both of the Helverns towards the midboard. Now, I think the plan was to try to be able to shoot into this Falcon over here a little bit, getting that anti-fly 2+, but the game kind of shifted a little unpredictably in the shooting phase specifically. So this Armiger Warglaive completely failed to hit or wound this Falcon. This unit ended up firing into the Falcon as well, and I believe he got maybe 3 or 6 wounds through. This Helvern ended up firing into this unit down here. I believe he was trying to crack this open so that he can charge the contents with the Deathwatch veterans afterwards. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to bring it down. He brought it down to just 1 wound remaining after firing the heavy bolter and the frag cannon into it as well. So we do end up surviving. That 4+ invulnerable was pretty solid. And then this Star Weaver only takes 2 wounds. I believe it was from some middling firepower. Canis Rex ended up firing into the Falcon. And unfortunately for him, we just make the save. He rolls nonsense on his shots. I think he rolled a 2 initially, and then he re-rolled it with a command point and only got 1 for his big cannon. And then we just made a 6+ save. I think we had a 5+, but we made it on a 6. So the Falcon's going to end up surviving. This Star Weaver ends up surviving. This Star Weaver survives at 1, and most of the troop is wiped out up here. I believe he's just going to be able to charge it with Canis Rex afterwards. But our opponent really had an opportunity to wipe out all of this and then charge the troops with the Armigers. I think that was the plan, and it just kind of fell to the wayside. Everything that lined up to shoot just failed to kill its target just barely, and were able to hold on. I think this was a turning point in this game, to say the least. Now, at this point, our opponent didn't have any other options but to just charge everything forward and tank shock where appropriate. So this Armiger Warglaive ends up getting into both the Falcon and the Star Weaver, uses tank shock on the Star Weaver. The contents are released. We lose a couple troops on the way out, and then the Deathwatch veterans could have piled in. Unfortunately, when he does charge the Deathwatch veterans in, we heroically intervene with the Solitaire. This Warglaive ends up going into this Falcon. These Helverns go into this Star Weaver, who survives on just 2 wounds afterwards. And then Canis Rex obliterates the Shadowseer brick with Helvern as well. Now, normally I like to highlight the Solitaire being absolutely incredible in situations like this. Unfortunately for us, we heroically intervened. We rolled, I believe, 3 or 4 ones, and then only was able to bring down 2 of the Deathwatch veterans afterwards. So they are, I believe, able to bring down the Solitaire in combat. Beyond this, we are going to lose him this turn. So our opponent ends their turn scoring 5 points on overwhelming force and discards recover assets for a command point. Now they've tied up a bunch of our units. They have a ton of toughness and OC, really kind of in our backfield, but this is kind of a lesson in sequencing. Our opponent was not able to bring down a unit he thought he was going to early on, and was then forced to put shots somewhere else. These Star Weavers just making those 4+ invulnerable saves was huge, and this Canis Rex failing to bring down the Falcon just by rolling a poor number of shots was pretty big beyond that. So we are able to go into this turn with a head of steam behind us, but in hindsight, if he was able to bring down this Star Weaver and this Falcon per se, or maybe all of these units, all of our troop would be tied up with these Helverns right now. Maybe we have a good play backwards, but we'd be dealing with substantially less attacks going into them. I know that, tank shock is a pretty big deal. The Reaper Chainsword going into one of our units of Harlequin troops with something like 8 attacks, plus a few mortals from tank shock can wipe an entire unit, as well as, the 3 or 4 attacks that he's getting off the Hellverns. Our 4+ saves aren't that great against just volume of attacks. So this last turn could have gone very, very differently. I'm glad it went in our favor, but this feels like one of the biggest turning points of this game. So when we move on to our turn 2, we draw no prisoners and marked for death, and we pretty much just have to push everything we can to clear this section of the board. We disembark all of our troops from the Falcons. We position up here. We bring a unit of fire dragons with an advance out of the Wave Serpent over here as well, and then we disembark our troop out of this Star Weaver. So we have a ton of fusion pistols and attacks with devastating wounds and +1 to wound coming in at these. Hopefully we can bring them all down, as well as quite a few Bright Lance and Pulse Laser shots. We are going to hold back our big unit of troops over here. We are in range of a couple fusion pistols right here, but we don't want to give our opponent any excess angles. This unit is really kind of the linchpin for our army, I feel like, getting into the late game. The Wave Serpent pushes down. The Fire Dragons over here can get some shots into this armature, and then our troops are going to stay put because this is a pretty substantial Overwatch threat with the frag cannon and a Flamer heavy bolter, I believe. So he could bring down a couple Fire Dragons or troop, and I would really just prefer to keep those fusion pistols. So despite having a ridiculous amount of firepower, we're still not able to shoot everything down. We used the no overwatch on this unit of fire dragons, and then he did end up overwatching one of our units of troops with a troop master and brought down a couple of them. This unit down here ended up throwing grenades into the Deathwatch veterans. We bring down 2 of them, or 1 of them, and put 1 on 1 wound remaining. We are able to lay waste to this armature with the fire dragons, and then this armature goes down, I believe, to some fusion pistols. Perhaps maybe we weren't in 6 inches over here. It was this falcon and possibly this Wave Serpent. We are then going to launch a ton of re-rolling wound fusion pistols into these units, and we're able to bring down 1 of the armatures down to just 4 wounds and the other down to 3. So hopefully we can just clean them up in the charge phase. In that phase, we end up doing just that. We position everyone that we can over here, able to either reactive move and get back inside of the Falcon or re-embark into the Star Weaver. We do bring both of these down, but one of them explodes and does 11 mortal wounds across 5 of our units. He does 3 to our Falcon and blows that up. 2 to the Star Weaver, blows that up. Ends up bringing down 2 of the Harlequin troops attached to a Troop Master unit, 2 from the Bare Bones unit, another 2 in the other Harlequin Troop Master unit, and we are kind of off to the races. So this was looking really, really solid for us until this. Explosions, tank shock, grenades are kind of the bane of our existence. So what seemed like a pretty incredible turn for us turned out to be a little bit less than. Now, on our opponent's turn 3, they end up drawing no prisoners and area denial while scoring a 10 on primary. Now, he ended up pushing these units up here towards this objective. This Warglaive fell back on turn 1 from the Shadow Seer unit, so he is back now. But this Hellvern is in line of sight to bring down all of this over here. So this Hellvern does bring down our 3 troop over here, which is going to keep us from scoring a 10 on our primary. Canis Rex gets up, just barely touches this objective. We couldn't keep him 1 inch out after a big kind of consolidate. We were trying to move block this potentially. The middling firepower is able to bring these down, and then Canis is able to bring down this unit as well. When he did move up, we reactive moved our Troop Master over here so that he could not get an easy charge into the fire dragons or collapse into multiple units. The last thing we want is Canis Rex charging a unit, tank shocking, killing something, piling in, and then consolidating beyond this afterwards. So we really just kind of want to keep him at bay as long as possible, but they were able to bring down 3 of our Harlequin troop units. Now, while I thought I was being cheeky, keeping Canis from being able to get towards this section of the board because he couldn't land on top of the terrain, he ended up making a very long charge into our Troop Master that we resurrected last turn. He CP rerolled it. I think it was a 9 or maybe a 10-inch charge. Makes it, tank shocks the Troop Master, kills him, piles into the Fire Dragons or consolidates into the Fire Dragons afterwards and wipes that entire squad. So Canis Rex is just getting kind of crazy. He and a couple Armigers this last turn killed 5 units. Kind of devastating at this point. So at the end of our opponent's turn, they scored 5 points on no prisoners, killing 4 units, and got 5 points in area denial, which is pretty big deal at this point. Our opponent is starting to run away with the score. We ditched 2 of our secondaries early on for some command points. We could have got 2 points on Marked for Death, but I thought the command point was going to be a little bit more relevant. We only scored a 5, but we did end up getting a challenger card, and it was Pivotal Moment, which is advance in charge for us later on, or we just need to kill one of our opponent's units. We get an extra 3 points. So I guess we're gaining a little bit of benefit from that. But at this point, we really just have to dogpile Canis Rex and hope for the best. Falcon moves forward. The Troop Master moves forward. The Troop Master with Chegarex Coil and this entire brick get out and move over here. And then we have a unit of Fire Dragons and this Wave Serpent down here. Now, this is still the bottom of turn 3, so we have a good opportunity to burn an objective and then try to get to our opponent's home field and burn that, or just maybe burn the center later on and catch up in this game. We ended up doing, with grenades, 5 fusion pistols, another fusion pistol, the Falcon, and the Wave Serpent, putting 19 wounds on Canis Rex in the shooting phase. The Fire Dragons whiffed entirely. We failed to wound with all of them but 2, and Canis made the 4+ invulnerables, and he was also getting +1 save. That last turn, he went like Super Saiyan. He gets an extra OC toughness, +1 to his save and leadership and a whole bunch of stuff until the next battle round, I believe, and then he rotated ion shields. I think it might have been for free with Canis's ability, but we were still able to push through 19 wounds, which is pretty good for us, given that we can charge and hopefully get 6 impact mortals itself. So at this point, our opponent is out of CP, and we are able to bring him down in the charge phase. We get 6 mortal wounds. All of them go through. No feel, no pains were made. And then we made a substantial amount of devastating wounds afterwards. This gives us a 5 points on assassination, and we should be able to get Defend Stronghold going into our turn 4. In our opponent's turn 4, they draw Tempting Target and Storm Hostile Objective. We use this bottom objective over here as the tempting target and force our opponent onto this objective. We get a big consolidate with the Troop Master. We're still closer to the center. We have another Troop Master kind of behind, being protected here. Our opponent has to hold this top objective. They're holding their home field, and it looks like he was kind of lining up to get a big charge into this unit, maybe just abandoning this back objective for a second. If he can clear the game and then burn something, he's in really, really good shape. We don't have many units left. But he does fire all of their middling firepower and the auto cannons into this troop unit, and it looks like we lost 4 or 5 of them at this point. So we get tank shocked again. He brings down a couple of our troops, but we utilize the -1 to hit ability, and we're able to walk out with a pretty big chunk of our fusion pistols remaining. In our turn 4, we just have to tie up and block whatever our opponent wants to do. He doesn't have that many units left on the table. So we push up our Wave Serpent over here to be able to get into Shuriken Cannon range if we really needed it. We use fallback, shoot, and charge with this unit of Harlequin troops to bring down the Death Watch veterans. We bring the Fire Dragons up to remove this Troop Master from combat against the Warglaive, and then we burn the center objective with the Warglaive as well. We are going to push this Falcon up, not to kill this Hellvern, but to just kind of tie it up. We go for the shots. Unfortunately, we just aren't able to bring anything down. Everything pretty much whiffs. In the charge phase, we're just trying to keep our opponent in position. So we charge the Falcon, we tank shock ourselves, get a couple wounds through. This Falcon is fine and safe, I believe, on 9 wounds remaining. And then we push our Harlequin troop onto our opponent's home field objective. So to close out the game, our opponent scores 5 on their top objective over here. He draws Assassination and Sabotage, gets rid of it, ends up getting Engage on all fronts for 1 point. We ended up drawing Secure No Man's Land and Tempting Target. So we're going to get 10 points in secondaries and then burn our opponent's home field objective, scoring us 35 points total on the final turn. We started this game off a bit rough, but we ended it pretty strong. So we ended up walking away the victor 88-61, but despite getting the win, this felt a little bit rough. I feel like we stole this game from our opponent, and if I was them, I would have been pretty dang salty. They really just have too many bodies that trade way too efficiently into our profiles. On turn 2, we got bailed out by some dice and one poor decision and got to steal a couple extra activations from our opponent with our more impactful units. Being able to fight again with a Troop Master and a Troop unit as well as a Falcon really kind of changed some of the dynamics on that section of the board. Getting just steamrolled by tank shock and explosions is brutal. We really rely on manipulating the hit dice for our opponent and the 4+ invulnerable save to keep us alive, but that just kind of bypasses everything, and running around as a bunch of 1 wound models that are pretty expensive for what they do just doesn't feel that great into something like what our opponent's bringing to the table. A troop unit with a Troop Master costs substantially more than a Warglaive or a Hellvern, but we need to do a pretty good amount of work to make that trade even close to even. Now, that being said, the Troop Master with Chegarax Coil was a huge deterrent. He was excellent in that role. He's able to threaten multiple units at once with grenades and Chegarax Coil and 5 fusion pistols and all the devastating wounds coming from the 55 attacks out of that unit before the Troop Master swings. Does really kind of change the dynamic into a lot of these heavy hitter armies. He could have walked out, collapsed a couple armigers, and then got back into a Wave Serpent. Even if that got brought down, we could have been in pretty good shape beyond that. So just kind of activation locking our opponent with that. The Shadow Seer brick seems like it did well enough with board control, but it really lacked the damage rolls needed to make something happen. We should have parked it on our natural expansion with 18-inch Lone Op. Looking back into this game, it's something that just couldn't be targeted the entirety. That way we could have walked out of each of our turns with a 10 in primary, as opposed to our first couple turns where we ended up scoring 5s. But it remains to be seen if forcing our opponent to that top objective was still the best fit. I think there's something else we could have done to make that happen. The Troop Masters wounding on 4s now is a pretty nice boost. Before the Knights were toughness 10, now they're toughness 9. So our Troop Master at strength 5, getting that +1 to wound, now gets to wound on 4s. He's a legitimate threat on his own. Throw grenades. If you get a fusion pistol shot through and melt a range and charge, you can threaten lethal on an Armiger or a War Dog, whatever it may be. The Fire Dragons were clutch, still doing Fire Dragon things. I believe they brought down 4 or 5 armigers and helped into Canis. No, they didn't help into Canis. They whiffed entirely. But they brought down enough armigers to get their points back. And they were a really good deterrent from our opponent just pushing everything at us early on. But overall, while this felt a lot better than the MSU list, I felt like I had a lot more 1v1 options to play the game with. It still doesn't feel like a great matchup. I think this one could have been decided by just a couple different decisions on our opponent's part. So I don't typically do this, but hindsight being 2020, I think I would have played this game entirely different. I honestly feel like I walked away from this game the loser at the end of it all. Getting bailed out by dice is not a reason to not try to get better in a specific matchup. This is not an indicator of success against knights, for me at least. What I should have done, knowing the damage from the Shadow Seer unit, knowing now that there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to bring down 2 armigers, 28 plus wounds with some feel no pains with this unit, I should have positioned them up here, just like I did, and force our opponent to interact with them, bring at least another unit or 2 with them, and then just use exit the stage to pull them off the board and reposition them later on. If we would have redeployed them to this bottom objective over here, we could have 1-inch this wall, we could have held this rune. It is almost impossible for our opponent to interact with us outside of these Deathwatch veterans, and I'm not worried about them because we do have the Solitaire, and they're not going to put enough attacks on that unit to make it meaningful, but we would have also scored a substantial amount more in primary throughout the game. Yes, we would not have contested our opponent on turn 2, these 5 points up here, but we also would have scored 10s 2 turns consecutively instead of 5s by not giving our opponent access to a firing lane to them. That 18-inch lone op is pretty solid. As well, with that unit, we could have used this to threaten their home field or anything else that wanted to collapse in on us. What we would do here is force a stalemate early on in the game. Our opponent would be scoring 10s for the entirety of the game, and then we would be scoring 10s as well on these 2 objectives. Maybe we're going to fight for the middle a little bit, but if our opponent decides they're going to bring any number of units out here, we can clap back. If they want to bring out 1 at a time, we have our Star Weavers and some trash and Harlequin troops to deal with that. We have some good cheeky angles to get goods lines of sight into as well. We could have just traded there back and forth for the remainder of the game. If our opponent decided they wanted to go all in on us at any point, I think we could have had enough firepower to really make something happen. That stalemate of a board position always goes to the second player as far as advantage, right? We had the bottom of the turn. We could have played a very, very patient game, again, just scoring 10s the entirety of the game, throwing a bunch of OC onto an objective later on, and then burning to catch ourselves a little lead. I don't believe this would have been a blowout of a game, but I believe it would have been much safer and much smarter, something where we don't have to rely on a ton of dice to make something happen. That's exactly what we want to do when we have the opportunity. So again, hindsight being 2020, I do not think this is a great example of what we should do against knights. I am not going to count this as a win at all. It felt like a loss. I would take this as a learning experience of what not to do in a matchup like this, and that is throwing away 200 to 300 point unit early on to contest 5 points and do not much else for the remainder of the game. But I hope you enjoyed. I'm sorry I haven't been able to solve the Chaos Knights or Imperial Knights mats just yet, but I think we're slowly getting there, closer to that at least 50-50 mark, just hoping our opponent makes some bad decisions. But overall, I hope you enjoyed the changes in this video as well. If you like the scorecard on the side, please, please, please let me know in the comments. It's kind of a pain to get it up there and block all the titles, but I'll absolutely keep doing it if it's something you all enjoy. But thanks again. Take care. Please like, share, subscribe, join the Discord. Any little bit of help always means more than you can possibly imagine, and I'll see y'all in the next video.